Good morning, evening, night, whatever time it is where you are. It is Jay. I am the Tada Sunday blogger here on the Trans Youth channel. And this week's topic is transgender history. And I am going to talk to you about the not very in-depth transgender history in Ireland, because I am Irish, I live in Ireland, and I know next to nothing about transgender history in the States simply because I don't live there. And although I could read up in depth on it, it is much, much more extensive than transgender history in Ireland. Pardon? And I thought that I may as well tell you about the transgender history of my own country. Because while it's not exactly the best country in the world, I still adore it, and I still have to transition here. So, pardon again, I've been drinking Coke even though it's only 10 in the morning. But yes, transgender history in Ireland. So, before Ireland became a republic, which was around, I don't even know when my own country became a republic. It was in the 1920s or so, I think. Don't quote me on that. But before we became a republic, and during the 20th century, early 20th century, 19th century kind of time, there was a lot of people who are now praised as some of the best LGBT writers in the world, per se. Like, older literature writers who were LGBT that I didn't know, but they wrote about LGBT things. And the people listed on Wikipedia are Oscar Wilde. I'm sure you've all heard of Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde is wonderful. Eva Selina Gore Booth. I have never heard of her. Elizabeth Bowen sounds vaguely familiar. Kate O'Brien sounds vaguely familiar. The Ladies of Llangollen. There's two L's, so I'm not sure if I said that right. It could be Welsh. It sounds more Welsh than Irish. And Somerville and Ross. Also, the patriots who fought for Irish independence were also LGBT, such as Roger Casement and Padraig Pearse. Now, there's no citation on Wikipedia about proof about them being LGBT, and I wish there was, but it's Wikipedia, so I'm going to just take it with a pinch of salt and say that it might not be true, but it could be true at the same time. Then that's pre-independence, so that was back when Irish people who were Catholic or who were just simply native Irish people were often had much less rights than the British, who had like invaded, colonized, taken over, whatever you want to say, Ireland at the time. And like, there was a lot of tension between Catholics and Protestants, because at the time Britain was a Protestant empire, whereas Ireland was Catholic, heavily Catholic. And there was a lot of tension between Catholics and Protestants, and there still is in a lot of places. But now it's much more subtle. And still the Catholic Church has such a massive influence in Ireland. Like, the country is still about 80% Catholic, and then about 10% Protestant, 15% Protestant and 5% other world religions. But yes, there's a lot of Catholic influence in Ireland, and that has been present for a long time. And that was all about independence. So this is just like a really quick Irish history you're getting here. So then, I know this is not exactly what we are talking about, but in Ireland there are certain laws, and this is the fully correct law system here about LGBT rights in general. Same-sex sexual activity only became legal here in 1993, which is astonishing because I seriously didn't know that until recently, and yeah, it was just, it took me back. It took me back, really. In the same year, they have an equal age of consent for same-sex activities. I think at the time, for a while, there was a higher age of consent for same-sex activities because they believed you had to be older to be sure that you were into that kind of thing. So so the age of consent was much higher than it was for what would have been considered regular heterosexual activities. There are anti-discrimination laws in employment since 1998, anti-discrimination laws in the provision of goods and services since 2000, anti-discrimination laws in all other areas, including indirect discrimination and hate speech, since 1989. Same-sex marriages is currently in the works this year. There's supposed to be a referendum on it, seen as we have to change our constitution because our constitution, when it was made up, was very, very Catholic and stated that marriage was between a man and a woman. So in order to change it, we have to have a referendum. Then recognition of same-sex couples has been there since 2011, but it's only been civil partnerships and such. Stepchild adoption by same-sex couples is impossible. So if one of the two people in the couple has a child and that was from their previous marriage or whatever, their partner cannot legally become a guardian of that child. Also, joint adoption by same-sex couples is not allowed. LGBT individuals are allowed to openly serve in the military. The right to change legal gender. Now, this is the most important one we have here. We are currently I go to, there's a Irish youth charity service in Dublin, and it's an LGBT youth service. And only last week they told us that the gender recognition bill has been finalised. So after about 7 years of hemming and hawing over the gender recognition bill and changing it and tweaking it, it's been finalised. So from the ages of 16 up, with parental permission, if you're under 18, you can seek to change your documents, all of them, including your birth cert, under this Gender Recognition Act, which is going to be passed as soon as possible. So it even includes people who are under 18, which is wonderful. So you have to be over 16, which I think is reasonable, but you will need both of your parents' written permission and a court order if you're under 18, which is quite a bit of hoop jumping. And all of that, I would say, I'm going to be honest, all of that is thanks to a lovely, lovely, wonderful woman called Lydia Boy. This is Dr. Lydia Boy I'm talking about. In 2007, she won a case against the High Court, which is one of the higher courts in Ireland. I can't remember what the order of courts is, but it's up there with one of the most important ones. She won a case against the government to reissue her birth cert with female instead of male on it. And that was in 2007. So she then kind of pushed forward the legislation about gender recognition. When she did that, when she won her case, she won her case against the government. The government said that they would make legislation for this as soon as possible. And now 7 years later, the legislation has been finalised and it's going to be passed as soon as possible. And it's very good. It's a very good place for Ireland to be in at the moment, because I'm 14. I'm going to be 15 this year in October. And so when I turn 16, this bill should be passed. So if I turn 16 and I'm still sure about this, and I'm sure that I want to change my marker and my birth cert, I can get that. If I can get a court order, if I can get a therapist letter, if I can get both my parents to sign something, I can do that now. And that is just so good for Ireland. I know it's not perfect and that Ireland still has such a heavy Catholic influence and it's still not perfect, but it is so much better than it used to be. 7 years ago, we wouldn't even have been able to think of going up against the whole flippin' government to get our birth certs changed. And then Dr. Foy did it, and now we can do it. So it's amazing, and I'm so happy about it. But yeah, that's the very brief transgender history of Ireland. And if you enjoyed learning about my silly country, you can like the video down that corner, I think, and subscribe, which is also down there, or subscribe. And you should subscribe for more videos. We make videos like every day. And you will see me again next Sunday. So subscribe to Trans Youth channel for more of me. Bye. This week's topic is music. And I could not be happier with that topic. I have an intense love of music. I play a lot of instruments. I listen to a lot of music. I sing. Music is very ingrained in my life at this point.